campaign and you want to go fully to level 20, go right ahead and have all your feats planned out, your whole arc. It's the level of organization of that player.
Yeah, to kind of go off on that before I get your question. I'm one of the players I plan almost every level. I have everything pretty much planned out, and I will adjust based on what happens in the campaign. Like I was planning to take one option, but then because of these events, this option was more appropriate, so I switched. Really, it comes down to what the player wants to do. But if you're incorporating multi-classing, you need to talk with the player of what it means to multi-class. Like if it's a by-the-book multi-class, and you're going to do a warlock with paladin, and the expert paladin combo, which is fun to play. Okay, well, why are you walking away from your patron to this god? Let's figure out how we're going to RP that. Or if they just want to refluff the paladin class as an extension of the warlock, okay, cool, no problems. Got taken care of. But having that discussion ahead of time would be the best way to approach it. This way everyone's on board on the same page and having fun with it. I think there is, yes. Yep.
In the context of like a long-running campaign, what's your best advice for reintroducing a character for a player that previously died?
Is this an NPC or player character?
Either, really.
Either?
But mostly player.
Okay. I've actually been on that end where I had a character come back later who was severely underleveled at that point. I actually had to just have him go fight with the city to help them the best he could while I focused on the new character. But it just depends on the circumstance of the death, how close they are to the party, and how much of that social aspect or social pillar you want to bring in. But if you're asking, are like means of doing it, like mechanical means?
Yeah, like logistically, like if my character died and I wanted to come back into the campaign with a new character even, how do you kind of like airdrop them into the party?
Oh, okay. So like this is almost like a quest to bring back the original character. It could be one way to approach it. And this is your current character until potentially. Maybe you might say this character, maybe you won't. Tom, any ideas on that? Right.
I don't think he's looking for, and Mike died. So Mike 2 comes walking out of the woods. Hey guys! The real one I would recommend is working with the DM. If you are the DM, since it's DM Bootcamp. One of the harder ones that come to mind is when your player's character dies in a dungeon. It's like, well, I'm not going to trust anybody I meet in an evil dungeon. Not going to hang out with them. So it's best to, I would say, establish a series of NPC characters. Just, it's like, oh, you met Mike, the rogue, and Jim, the bard. So if one of those characters go down, you can go, but Jim the bard appears. Jim the bard is waiting around the corner going, I heard about Mike, this is horrible. I'll tell you what, I'll travel with you guys until we can get him back. Which allows them to have something to play until the side quest to get Jim back. Mike. Too many names.
Yeah.
404 brain out.
If you're in a dungeon, you can do the prisoner found in the dungeon or another adventurer wandering in. If you're not in the dungeon, it's a little easier, but if they are in the dungeon, I would even suggest how much longer you think they're going to be in the dungeon to ask the player if they want to wait it out until they come back to do a proper resurrection of the character.
You want to bring back that I was the one who in the dungeon.
Yeah.
Not a part of the original question.
Yeah, I'm just using that as an example.
Oh, yeah, adventure.
Yeah, but if they're not in the dungeon, it's a little easier to say, okay, we'll go to the temple of, say, Paylor again. The biggest ones here, they should have the ability to cast resurrection, and we can see if we can bring this character back. But just a random airdrop in, yeah, you don't want to break the immersion if possible, but if the player wants to really play, and they want to get that character back, then you could, magic's weird. You could do a lot of stuff with that. You could do a revenant version of the character temporarily. If they want to try something different, then the easiest thing is a prisoner or another adventurer walking in. Like I actually had a character of mine that died during a dungeon. He was going to be ways to go about it, but whatever you, and it's your boss. So you want to figure out, if it's like the main boss, figure out what the boss's motivation is and why are they doing it and how they're approaching it.
Like, if you can't think of a reason why you would want to defeat this boss, the player's not going to be able to think of a reason why they want to defeat this boss.
There's no question.
And I believe in the red there.
Yes. Would you be able to speak from your experience, best practices for new players in the campaign? Like your whole campaign is just a bunch of new player friends. As a DM, to make it a public introduction and fun, maybe easier, so to speak, maybe the more interested to
Patience, definitely, because there's going to be a lot of, what do you mean to take an action? Like a standard action as opposed to an enhanced action. You know, you'll get a lot of the first timer questions. I recommend patience and note cards. As far as a new DM, when it comes to the combats, maybe, you know, that we talked about floating dice rolls.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this guy rolls a d6 to attack, but these are level 1s, and this is 5th edition, so let's just make that a d4 and not tell.
Don't pick the monsters that are known to be potentially TPKs, which is something we'll get to eventually, but it's like, maybe don't throw a basilisk spike. Because they probably don't know to go get, anti-petrification means. Look for, if they have certain interests as players, look for things that reflect that. Like if they're into certain anime, maybe bring some certain aspects of that anime in and engage with the story more. The floating dice rolls help. Just make the encounters, at any point be ready to say, okay, yeah, that last hit finished off the boss. Even if they had 70 more hit points,
Yeah.
it's good. And then patience, explaining the features and breaking down, maybe have a few little funny examples to go with. And and just encourage communication back and forth. And usually you'll have a good time. And if they want to play a druid, pre-print all the beasts ahead of time.
I would definitely run them through a first few mock one-shots to really show them the dynamics of how to actually control your player, your character, and what you can do.
Yeah, short modules, short adventures, and one-shots are good. Great for that. Excellent question.
And now for the silly answer, team white, just kill them all. No one question. Alright, Winter Soldier. Yes.
If you want a small campaign that should be people, how do you get diverse but still not really overwhelming?
Do you not like to overrun them completely because they're a little smaller team?
But still make it like interesting or
I tend to try to make it a bit more personal. So instead of my big bad evil guy being the most powerful big bad evil guy in the world that 3 people wouldn't be able to defeat if they were the 3 best people in the world, I tend to be making it more, it's like, oh no, there's by making it more personal, it's like, there's this other team here. They're just doing horrible stuff. So now it's your job to hunt down this other 3-person team made up of a similar, if not the same, dynamic. You know, it's like, oh, you've got a ranger, well, they've got a gunslinger. You have a rogue, well, they have a monk. You have a barbarian, they have a paladin.
Yeah, I'd say lean into the other pillars, exploration and social. Utilize some puzzle encounters instead a little more.
Yeah.
But have multiple ways to solve the puzzles because not everyone is great at puzzles as other players. Even though I'm on point at level, I'm 20 intelligence wizard, but in real life I'm not good at puzzles, guys.
Always be prepared to let your players know that it's like, just roll this check and then give them a hint based off of the amount they succeeded on that check helps. But yeah.
Before I go to your
I hope that
questions,
answers your question.
there's another point I want to throw out real quick, which is important, especially in 5th edition, and it kind of goes off the Basilisk example. Know what you're throwing at your players and know what they can handle. If they can only pump out, like, let's say 50 points of damage, don't throw them something that has 500 hit points and can deal out 50 points of damage each attack. You're going to overwhelm them real fight itself, Alpha Petrification, is an easy fight. But it's when they turn to stone, and all of a sudden they're down a player, or down another player. That's when it turns into a lethal encounter. I had 2 players that 3 of the 4 characters were knocked unconscious due to a poisonous gas. And the 2 constructs weren't even touched yet in the combat. They were small room trapped. They found a way to get out, and they survived, but they could have handled the fight otherwise, but they all just barely failed that DC. So that is something important to keep in mind.
Oh yes, always read through all of the effects of the creature you're putting in, so that way you know. I don't know if there's a lot of, I believe it's 4th edition players out here. I was talking about it earlier with him. The Displacer Beast doesn't sound that dangerous until you realize that in the description it says you can only defeat this, you can only hit this thing on even numbered die rolls.
Yeah, the 4th edition Displacer Beast
So
was
now,
brutal.
it's like, oh hey, I rolled 17. Nope. 19. Nope. Wait, did you just take my high crit property away?
And you still had to hit the AC of the creature on
Yeah.
top of the even rolls.
AC on top of even rolls, and you made a very hard to hit creature.
And you want to throw that in your 5th edition games by mystery players.
So
Let them level a little bit first, but we have a few more minutes, so
Death's got a
definitely.
question.
Yeah. We'll go with you
Sorry.
first.
So I want to put together a dungeon crawl, and so I was curious about maybe like a very easy gist of how we go about like stacking it with monsters and like figuring out the layout and things like that. Like based off the Greek mythos labyrinth with Minotaur and stuff.
I got you.
So
Purpose behind the rooms, the design, the layout. What was this place before it was been turned into what it is now? Is it an active dungeon? Like Gelatinous Goose, they clean the dungeon, so they're going to be around if it's going to be a clean dungeon. If you have controlling enemies, intelligent enemies, then maybe it's an active like arcane laboratory in a sense, or someone's crypt, not so much.
A really fun way to design a dungeon, especially one that's labyrinth style, is there's a game I especially look at called Blood Bowl. Well, they have this fumbling rule with a D6. You basically take that same concept, put it down, roll a D6, hallway goes this way, hallway goes that way. So it's actually just a randomized directions in the hallway moving forward, and allows you to kind of set it up the way you want to, but even you're a little bit surprised about the next route it's going to take when you're designing your dungeon. And as far as staffing with monsters, gelatinous cubes for cleaning the hallways, and mimics for guarding your real loot.
Yes.
You have another question over here? Yes.
So, probably most people are playing 5th edition these days that have or another play older editions of times. Are there mechanics from those games that you think we should be using here, like Displacer Beast?
Whatever you want to bring into your games. The exploding zombies I mentioned earlier was actually from 4th edition. It's called Death Throes. I think Magic Gathering uses the term. But there were a lot of monsters that when you got them to 0, it's a challenge. It's a skill that comes with time. Don't be afraid to try going back and forth on some stuff. For short rests, because I know I pay the world a lot for short rests, we need short rests, guys. Mix it in with just walking and light exploration. Like, oh no, when you guys were just walking around, nothing serious, you got a short rest in the process, so you could have wrapped your wounds and healed up a bit, or maybe regained some short rest abilities.
Also, you can treat puzzle-like encounters as short rests in some situations as well. You're just sitting there kind of thinking about it, actually, lifting rocks.
What's the next question? Actually, it would be him, then we'll go to you.
So when dealing with a brand new player, it can be like intimidating to ask them to read the entire player's handbook, or even like one of the starter set booklets. Like, what's the minimum amount of reading that I can ask somebody to do before they jump into D&D for the first time?
I would say whatever class they want to play, at least understand the basic features of their class, and then go with them as the DM. Especially if it's a mage, because the magic system can be a little complicated at times. But at the very least, say, look, just understand your character, your class. And if you have questions, come to me, we'll figure it out.
For me, I believe there's a how-to section in the player's handbook. I always make sure they read that. And then once again, like he said, I want you to read your entire race, your entire class. And I want you to at least peruse through the index about how every ability works.
Also, printing out those for their own copy helps too. We have, I think, time for this last question.
Here, our last question.
Yeah, I'm thinking particularly for modules, how do you keep your players invested in side quests? I feel like I can set up the main module, like the main story really well, but then they're like, what's the point in doing this other thing? Consequence is, if you don't do that, they're not high enough level to do the main quest.
I would say tie it with their backstories as best as possible, or as a stepping stone to the main quest. So make it that there's a reward that leads to, like, the big bad guy's defenses. There's a secret here. Or hey, your backstory about that person that wronged you, there's a clue here. That's one way I go about it. But we're gonna have to pack up so they can set up.
Funny, so the answer, cattle props.
We do have in our account 6 o'clock.